Awesome. Welcome, everybody. I'm so glad you're here. I'm Dr. Amanda Kemp, and we're just going to give everyone a minute to get on. If you can just open up the chat so you can get yourself familiar with it, that would be awesome.
I think it's over to the right if you haven't seen it yet.
Great.
Great.
All right. So why don't we go ahead and get started, Erica? Are you ready?
Yeah, go ahead.
All right, here we go. So welcome to How White Women Can Talk with Women of Color About Race and Avoid Harm, even when your intentions are good. So Erica, if you could advance the slides for me, that would be awesome.
Sure.
Thank you. So let me start with a question. What would be possible if you could have deeper relationships and stand shoulder to shoulder with women of color? What would be possible for you? What would be possible for our nation at this point in time? Today's presentation will show you how to build authentic and powerful partnerships with women of color so that we can create more racial justice in a world that works for everyone. So in the amount of time that we have, we're going to give you as much value as we can, but we probably won't get to all of your questions. So I promise to show you at the end how you can get more information, how you can get more of me and Erica, if you would like that. And if you stay until the end, we have a special gift available only to those folks who show up live and stay for the whole presentation. So let's start with introductions. I'm Dr. Amanda Kemp, and I'm the founder of Racial Justice from the Heart. In Racial Justice from the Heart, we mentor people who want to stand on the uncommon ground of justice and compassion in all of their relationships and on our planet. I grew up in the South Bronx in foster care because my mom was addicted to heroin. I grew up with the trauma that kids in poor urban environments face every day: street violence, self-hate, racism in schools, sexual abuse, family breakdowns, alcoholism, all of that. I've seen it. And I'm very grateful for the life I have today. But how I grew up is part of the reason that keeps me going, keeps me staying in this work and committed to changing the world. So thanks to some wonderful activists and change makers in the 1960s and 70s, people who built institutions and created special programs, I was able to go to college. I went to Stanford University. I graduated with a PhD from Northwestern, and in both places, I focused on race and African American and African studies. In a lot of ways, my life is a miracle, and I'm very, very grateful for what I've been given and for all the love I have in my life. But I also want you to know that I'm a brokenhearted mom, and I'm going to tell you about that in a moment. Why don't you share about yourself, Erica?
Thanks. Well, I'm Dr. Erica Fitz. I'm a senior trainer here at Racial Justice from the Heart. And I started working with Amanda about 3 years ago. And I had some of the same issues that probably a lot of you have, like how I can get to know more people of color, what can I actually do to create racial justice, and how could I avoid causing harm. I hate the idea that I could obliviously be hurting other people. And the good news is that since I started working with Amanda, I've really found my lane for what I can do to create more racial justice in my community and to break out of my white bubble. So now I work with a grassroots multiracial group that organizes for educational equity. I joined a local Bible study at a Black church in my town. Biblical studies is what I have my doctorate in. And I've started speaking up about racial bias more at my Quaker meeting. But it wasn't always like that. I grew up in a rural and very segregated part of Pennsylvania, and nearly all of the people around me were white. But the only people of color I met or had any contact with were in the city, and they were usually poor and urban. So I internalized a lot of the bias, a lot of the negative stereotypes that our culture often attributes to people of color. And I have had to peel back some of those layers and transform them to really be comfortable working in these multiracial settings. So that's a little bit about my path, but I'd like to ask you if you could share who or what motivates you to seek racial justice or to cultivate beloved community.
And while you're writing your why, I'll share a little bit more about mine. This is my why. I say that I'm a brokenhearted mom because I cannot protect my children in this society. I have two Black teenagers, one of whom, my son, feels keenly that his life is not as valued as in our society as white teenagers. And I really can't argue with him. In 2016, even though Black men were like 6% of the population, they were about 80% of the people killed by the police. And ultimately, what motivates me is that I want every mother's child to matter. And I want every mother and every person to feel connected to every child and to value every child. That's what's motivating me. And that's why I'm having this conversation, this very important conversation with you today, because what each of us does, what each of you does, where you are, can make a big impact.
So today's presentation is for you if you feel like this when race comes up, kind of are a deer in headlights and you go blank, you feel paralyzed, you just don't know what to do or to say. And maybe right now, you're not saying anything. This presentation is also for you if you have working relationships with women of color, but they stay superficial because you tiptoe around race, afraid of saying the wrong thing. And that really also keeps you from being a real partner for racial justice.
Yeah. So if you're ready for authentic relationships with women of color, then there's some things that you're going to need to look at. You're going to need to look at your hidden bias, your practices for self-love, how you listen, how you share. And you're going to need to look at who you have mentoring you, because all of this is going to affect how confident you can be, how open and grounded you are as you work towards racial justice. And I want you to know that it is possible to have an authentic, fun, powerful relationship with women of color. So I want to tell you about Leah. Leah came to us because she was super self-conscious and anxious about saying the wrong thing to women of color in her work in climate justice. So after using the same principles that we're going to share with you today, she's gotten a lot more free and grounded in her relationships with women of color. And in fact, she told me about a road trip, a long road trip she took with a friend of hers, where she was able to poke fun at herself and her white conditioning, being authentic and present as her friendship with this woman of color developed. So she said race was always on the table, but her fear of saying the wrong thing had disappeared. So it didn't dominate her thinking or their conversation.
So the first step in having these more authentic relationships is needing to get in there and transform those hidden racial biases. That fear of your bias coming out is probably what keeps you afraid from to talk freely with women of color. And this makes sense because if you don't see your biases, you're likely to commit microaggressions without intending to do so, but nevertheless. And of course, those are going to cause friction in your relationship. So let's talk about some of the ones that we've seen most commonly. The first one is a superiority or a colonial mindset. So one of the ways that this manifests is that women of European descent often seem surprised to see women of color, and especially Black women, who are more educated or have more professional credentials or are in some way in a higher position than they are. So for example, when I was in college, it was really the first time that I met wealthy Black women. And I felt really intimidated and threatened by them. And I'm sure that those women sensed that.
Yeah. And I've definitely experienced that look that's like, whoa, how did you get here? And it really may not even be a conscious superiority, but it's like an unconscious expectation that women of color will somehow be operating at a lower level, that will be less accomplished, or that will have fewer credentials, or, less money, or something like that. So, and when we talk about a colonial mindset, we're really talking about when you automatically center yourself and expect everyone else to center you as well. So, for example, I was talking with a white woman once who told me that her plan was to interview key Black leaders in her town to find out what their experiences of racism were. She wanted to extract, that is, she wanted to create a one-way relationship where these people were supposed to open up their hearts to her so she could understand. So a colonial mindset is a one-way relationship. It also manifests as people going to, quote, save somebody, like a white savior complex. A colonial mindset assumes that what you have is better, or that whoever this person is and whatever their experiences are must be made available to you. So you're always putting yourself at the center. And inside of it, there's not a lot of permission asking, there's not a lot of mutuality, and there's definitely not humility.
So let's talk about white innocence and Black guilt. In our society, whiteness is treated as automatically innocent and Blackness as automatically suspect. And white women and girls are held up as symbols of purity and blamelessness. And in the meantime, teachers punish Black girls as though they're adults. Security officers and police follow Black women around a store or make traffic stops for no reason. And this presumption of white women feeling innocent, being presumed by others as innocent, of course, is a double standard. It causes friction with Black women who are automatically considered suspect. But all of this is happening at a subconscious level. So we say this so that you watch out for it. Watch out for it in yourself and also in your community. And that you understand that this double standard is operating and may cause tensions. It's bigger than you when you're in a relationship with a woman of color.
Yeah, I think that understanding the context of white innocence and Black guilt is crucial for you to appreciate why there is tension before you even open your mouth.
Mm-hmm.
And not to take it all on a personal level, but to think about dynamics that are happening in our society more broadly. So now let's talk about the fear of the angry Black woman. I can't tell you how many conversations I've had with Black women who say to me, I want to bring this up at work, Amanda, or I want to bring this up in this, community setting, but I'm afraid that I'm going to get stereotyped as an angry Black woman and nobody's going to listen to me. And on the other hand, I've also heard from white women who say to me, Amanda, I'm scared of Black women. I have this neighbor, I have this colleague, and she always looks like she's mad or something. And so what I say to them and what I'm going to say to you right now is that the presumption that if we're not smiling, that we're out to get you is a stereotype. And it is super harmful. If you read Michelle Obama's book, Becoming, she talks about how her husband's presidential advisor or his campaign advisors took her aside to show her a videotape of her face. And they said, literally, Michelle, you got to change how you look because it's costing Barack Obama points with white people. So now let's go to step 2. So how do you take it on, right? How do you transform your hidden biases? Well, believe it or not, the first way, the beginning, is to start with self-care and self-love. So why do I say this? Well, first of all, if you practice self-care and self-love, then you won't go into conversations expecting women of color to be responsible for your well-being.
Yeah, so this is really important. So as a white woman, I have to have built up enough self-love to counter responses that are going to come up automatically. White fragility, defensiveness. So I need to project that I'm not going to collapse, fall apart, blow up at the other person. I don't expect to be treated with kid gloves. And so if I do that, it's possible to create a space where there can be honest and real conversation. So this is why we talk about self-love providing a foundation of truth.
Yes. And I know many people on this call probably have read Robin DiAngelo's White Fragility, or you've seen her videos on it. And she'll tell you, how to recognize white fragility, but actually not how to disarm it or how to uh, dismantle it or overcome it. And here's the secret. You can't be with an uncomfortable truth if you don't have the emotional and inner resilience to face it. You will just automatically shut down. And when you shut down, you're actually not present for the relationship, for the conversation, or for the movement for racial justice. So when you work with us, you'll see that we integrate self-love and self-care into all the information about implicit racial bias and how you transform it. So I'm going to take a sip right now of my kombucha because, I put hydrate on here to remind me to drink. One of my mentors, and I have to tell you, I have 3 mentors I'm working with right now. She says our bodies need water to move energy and to assimilate information well. So drinking water, drinking, good stuff is part of self-love. So why don't you all take a drink too if you have it?
Yeah, so summarize that we need to cultivate self-love, and I'll emphasize here cultivate, because we actually see this as a practice. Because if we don't have enough self-love with which to greet our own faults, we can't be honest with ourselves or with other people. So this is one of the things that distinguishes racial justice from the heart from a lot of other racial justice work out there. We are grounded in a practice of love and this active cultivation of it.
And what I want to add to that is, self-love is effective. It's not just nice. It's not theoretical, but actually practicing it causes a change in your nervous system. And that's the truth of my own experience. So when I'm in a space of self-love for myself, I'm actually more able to be an instrument of transformation rather than an instrument of my ego. I can listen more deeply. I just have my whole way of being is more expanded when I'm coming from a place of self-love. And I'm more able to recover quickly from the inevitable bad stuff that happens. And it's all around us, as we know. So I can't overemphasize how important practicing self-love, cultivating, filling your well is. In fact, I want to tell you about Mary because she recently sent me this email after we had done some one-on-one mentoring. And Mary said that when I think about the ways that God has helped me through my lack of self-love and the suffocating self-judgment that was inhibiting my relationships, I think about the coaching you did with me, and I realize how vastly different my outlook is now. So one of the big changes that happened for Mary was that she was she had a friend in her church, a Black woman, and she and this woman were in this conflict because the friend said to her something like, if you're really going to be my sister in Christ, if you're really going to be my friend, then how come you never bring up racism? How come I don't hear you talking about, unarmed Black people being killed by the police? And so Mary, at first was super defensive with her friend, and then she got very judgmental of herself. But after working with us, she could not only see what her friend was talking about, but she could forgive herself and then take the concrete steps to go back to her friend and talk about her blind spots and her fear. And what I want you to know is that Mary is actually now leading workshops in her own faith community. So the beauty of self-love is that you get to grow rather than fall apart when you get called out. And when you have a mentor, you can own your biases and love yourself. And then you can talk with other people about it. So in Racial Justice from the Heart, we show you how to tell on yourself in a spirit of love and in a spirit of learning rather than in a spirit of condemnation. And we know this condemnation out there. It is all over in our culture, especially in social media. So it's just a matter of time before someone calls you out, rightly or wrongly. But when you have a mentor and when you have self-love, you can sort it out and you can move on rather than getting stuck and feeling angry, guilty, defensive, ashamed.
So one of the key practices that we use for cultivating self-love is called holding space for transformation. This comes from Neonu Span, who is the founder of Beyond Diversity 101. And she describes holding space for transformation as being unconditional love and unconditional acceptance.
Yes. Yes. This is like one of those practices that just struck me as I used it more and more. Under Neonu's leadership, I saw how it could work inside communities that were having conflict. So, Erica, I wonder if you could just put that beyonddiversity101.org into the chat. I highly recommend you check her out. So what I found when I was sharing holding space for transformation with people is that most of us don't know how to be unconditional love and unconditional acceptance, in part because we don't feel like we've ever experienced it. So I developed a short exercise just to give us a taste of it. So I hope you'll join me in giving it a try tonight, because Erica, and thank you, Erica, is going to walk us through it.
Yeah, so the checklist is in front of you, and this isn't gospel. These are the basic elements, is that we get our feet on the ground, we focus on breath, and we allow unconditional love and acceptance. But I am going to walk you through it. So I invite you to sit forward in your chair enough that you can put both feet on the ground. And if you're comfortable with it, close your eyes and shrug your shoulders so that they relax, and start to let yourself feel heavy in your chair. So once you've got your feet on the ground, draw in a deep breath into the center of your heart. Notice your breath as you take it in, as the air flows under your nostrils. And then as you release it and let it go. Take another deep breath, and this time slow it down to 3 or 4 counts. And then exhale for 4 counts. Breathe again into your heart center deeply and release it. And continue to sink into that breath. Feel your weight in the chair, your feet on the floor. I invite you to put a hand over your chest if you like. And finally, we use a phrase that can serve as a touchstone to access this unconditional love, unconditional acceptance, to allow it to flow through us and to fill us. So the phrase I invite you to try is, I am unconditional love. I am unconditional acceptance. And you can say that silently or you can say it aloud. I am unconditional love. I am unconditional acceptance. And when you spend a moment or so there, you can maybe rub your hands together, feel the energy there. Give yourself some love. You can open your eyes if you've had them closed.
Awesome. Thank you. So I wonder if everybody could just put something in the chat. Just let us know how you're feeling having taken some time to hold space for transformation with us. How are you feeling, Erica?
Good. Yeah, it's nice.
Awesome. So in our classes, we go into more detail about why we do it this way and how to use it in a conversation. But I just wanted to make sure that you had a taste of it in this masterclass so that you could feel what your body feels like when you hold space for transformation. How it allows you to slow down. So just take a moment to imagine that you could bring this kind of listening and energy to a conversation with a woman of color about race. Like, how might that conversation be different if you brought this kind of energy to it?
Yeah, and we talk a lot about feelings in our work because we know that when we don't tend to feelings, accept them or acknowledge them first, then be able to accept that they are, maybe even investigate them with a mentor. They come back, they bite you in the butt every time, and they undermine you.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm seeing some people are saying things in the chat, like Cynthia says she feels good. Lene feels calm. Mary says much more centered and present. Anne says intentional. Betsy says open and positive. Yeah. And Susan says, I think I'd be less nervous about saying the wrong thing. Yeah, when you're coming from this space. Awesome. And that was just a taste of it. So let's go on. Let's keep moving to step 3 because we only have an hour for tonight's presentation. And after you've had a chance to work on your hidden biases and cultivate self-love with practices like holding space for transformation, then we recommend that you initiate a conversation. And so in this situation, the next step would be for you to commit to leaning in and listening first in the conversation. And by listening, I actually don't mean that you should expect this woman to educate you. There's so much free stuff out there. There are online courses you can take. We offer stuff, a lot of organizations do. So don't lean on your friends and colleagues of color to educate you. Educate yourself. Use the stuff that's out there. But by leaning in, I mean to extend yourself from the heart, to listen from the heart and the mind, to understand the woman of color point of view.
Yeah, we spend a lot of time on this step in our courses because there are so many different kinds of conversations. But one step that's super important when it's a multiracial conversation, especially a white person approaching a person of color, is to ask permission. What we're recognizing here is that living with racism is traumatic. It's systemic, chronic trauma. So jumping into a conversation about racism can be like jumping into a conversation about sexual assault. So just be respectful and ask permission. You could say, hey, can we talk about this? Or would this be a good time to talk about this? And when you ask permission, be prepared to accept whatever the answer is, especially if it's a no, and to not take that personally.
Yeah. And that's really important, is to not take it personally, especially if you want to really be of service. And this is where I want to talk to you about standing in for your group. If you're of European descent, I recommend that you build up the capacity to stand in for your group, to be able to talk about and receive information about white people as a whole without feeling like you have to defend or clarify or feel personally attacked. I have a friend, someone who I trust a lot. And I'll tell you, one of the reasons why I trust her is because she is always willing to own what white people have done over time, notwithstanding that she herself is an incredible change maker. She is always willing to stand in for European Americans as a group. And by being willing to stand in the place of that group, or even for an individual who did something wrong to someone else, she and you could be giving someone else, a woman of color, an opportunity to release a hurt and move forward. Being willing to stand in will earn you trust, and it might even earn you loyalty. But this is advanced. Standing in for your group takes emotional resilience. I don't want you to stand in like, I don't want to baton, like you shut everything down so you can hear some really difficult stuff. No, we actually want you to stay open-hearted and present. So if you haven't built up enough self-love and acceptance of yourself and of your ancestors, then I recommend that you get a mentor and you practice.
Yeah, because if you do build it up, if you do get some outside perspective, you're able to hear that criticism of your group and it doesn't have to harm you. It can be like breathing in and letting go. You can hold space for transformation and be completely present, but not have to defend or shut down or run away or argue, which is a big temptation for me, I know. And so it's about being able to be with people in a really more generous way. So next, we also say, when you're listening, don't listen for facts. Listen underneath for values and for feelings. Because so often that is really what people are hungering to have honored, to be gotten. Finally, be quiet and pause. That pause can really be powerful. And even if the silence is uncomfortable, sometimes that discomfort is what allows another person to go deeper into what they're feeling or what they really mean. And your silence also can communicate, I'm really listening to you. I don't have my slingshot answer ready to fling back at you. And so this, again, can take some training because it's not the way in our culture we usually operate, but it also is really powerful for opening things up and letting them get deeper.
Yeah. I see so many great questions in the chat, and what I'm saying is that we're going to mark them, and then we're going to come back at the end of the presentation to answer some of these questions. So thank you. Keep them coming. So the next step, so after you had a chance to listen in the way that Erica just described to you, I suggest that you ask the person, would you like to hear what it's like for me? And then if they say yes, share something short and personal about how you see whatever the situation is. I recommend that you ask Because remember how I spoke about a colonial mindset, which is like this, let me extract and it's one way. By asking, you recognize that other person's autonomy. Maybe they don't have the space to listen to you right now. And if someone doesn't have the space to listen to you, it's really not in your best interest to share, right? It's like a waste of your time and your emotional energy. So by asking, you give the person the space to say yes or no. And when they say yes, in some ways, they're committing to listening to you. And so when I say share short, I really do mean short, because it's better for someone to ask you for a little more information than to feel like, you're going on and then people feel put upon, right? So just share something short and personal for you. And if the person wants to know more, they can ask you for more.
So let's talk about after the conversation. For step 5, we encourage you to reflect, and doing it with a mentor and getting emotional support can be a really critical piece of having that reflection really supercharge, right? So having a mentor gives you a way to check things out, to see what you might have missed. And they can help you learn from a situation rather than getting stuck in regret or in guilt.
Yes, yes. And, I could just say yes a million times because of getting stuck in regret and guilt. So with a committed mentor, you can get more and more effective and make changes over time. So my mentors have held me to account, and they help me to stay on track with my life purpose. And equally important, I have one mentor in particular who makes me laugh and who reminds me that I'm deeply loved by my ancestors and angels, and that I'm never alone.
One of the things that our program offers is a space where European Americans have a place where they can process being white and doing racial justice stuff without people of color having to listen in. Because being that sounding board does take some emotional work for people of color. And so I have my own mentors, and there is something really freeing about being the center of attention without worrying that I'm burdening my friends. So I recommend that you find a mentor if you don't have one.
Oh, is that me, Erica?
Yeah.
Okay. So,
no, wait, I'm sorry. Oh,
you
I
want
can talk about Carol.
Okay.
Yeah, so we have this lovely woman named Carol. She is European American. She's in her 70s, I think. And before she got some mentorship, she was really frustrated with herself, really in a place of despair. She was working as an activist with SURGE, Stand Up for Racial Justice, but she always felt like she wasn't doing enough. Well, after being mentored, she told us, when I think about where I was at the time of our first call and where I am now, it's amazing. So she had worked with Racial Justice from the Heart to transform her hidden biases, to practice self-love. And over time, she was really able to turn around that pattern that she had, so that one of the things she said at the last mentoring call was, in general, I have confidence. I feel solid. I don't feel the personal frustration and despair. I think more clearly. I'm finding my lane. So I want you to know it is possible to build these deeper relationships with women of color and to stand for racial justice in a way that you are uniquely called to, but also to feel good while you're doing it.
Yes. So, okay. So what you've already gotten, these 5 steps that we shared will serve you, no doubt. And in fact, if you stay on until the end, we're going to give you a beautiful PDF that Erica designed. It's a cheat sheet, and it'll summarize the main points of this presentation. So she'll put a link to it in the chat. But let's talk about if you would like support in applying these steps to your situation. Because if you would like some support in actually bringing this, implementing this, then we have something more for you. We've created this workshop called Transform Your Hidden Biases. And basically, it's an opportunity for you to do your own work. This is a workshop for people of color, for people of European descent. There'll be some separate sections, but each person is given some space to do their own work, to uncover how racial bias has been internalized by them and how it's playing out in their lives. And how we approach it, as I said earlier, is along the way of uncovering that bias, we teach you ways to practice self-love and self-care and self-acceptance. Because the greater your capacity is there, the more you'll be able to see the truth and not collapse, be devastated, crawl in a hole somewhere so we never see you again. We want this workshop to be empowering to you. And so that's why we teach it with racial justice and racial bias being very clear, and cultivating that practice of self-love and self-care so that you can use what you learn in a way to be a tool. So we call it learning how to tell on yourself. So what you get from this then is an action that you can take that resonates with you and with where you are, the community that you serve. So the kinds of things that you might bring to a workshop on your, on hidden biases is the fear to say the wrong thing, which if you're a facilitator or wherever you are in the world of racial justice, this is something that many of us are concerned with. So the workshop is actually going to have a small discussion component. So it gives you a chance to try things out and to put it out there in a learning context. And as I said earlier, we're going to have some distinct groupings so that people of European descent don't have to worry that what they're saying is going to harm people of color as they explore what they're learning. And similarly, people of color will have some space to look at some stuff without having a white gaze in the space. So this is especially important if you live in a white bubble. So if you live in a world where, it's white folks all the time, then you need to consciously and consistently put yourself in a space where you are absorbing the authority perspectives of people of color and looking at the world with a racial justice lens. Because we live in a white supremacy culture, society, because we live in the field of whiteness, which we'll talk about in this workshop, if you don't consciously resist the tide, every day that white supremacy culture is being strengthened inside of you. So it's something that you have to actively take on. And I know someone on this call already talked about actively desegregating her life and what a big difference it's made. And then finally, this is a great next step for you if you don't know what to do next. Let's say you've read a lot of books. So there's always folks, there are librarians, teachers, people from reading groups. And so maybe you have some intellectual capacity right now, but you actually don't know how to put it into action. Well, this 3-day workshop is going to give you an opportunity each day to reflect and to take in action and to come back and have some support with regard to that action. So if you don't know what to do next, this is a way for you to get some support in figuring that out. I think it's really important I think you'll get it from us that we think that mentorship is important and that none of us can do this alone. None of us can do this alone. We all need accountability and support. And so this training that we're offering is a way for you to get that. So just to be real, it's an opportunity for you to become a real ally and partner. When you do your own work, when you have mastered, and when I say that, what I mean is when you know what's inside of you, when you know your lineage, when you can accept it, when you can use your experience to talk with other people of European descent, if you're of European descent, other people of color, there's like an authority that you have that you can't have if you don't own your experience. So confidence comes from owning who you are, what you know, what you don't know, what you've done, what your lineage has done. That's where your confidence is going to come, not from sort of, hoping for the best. So the benefits are, of course, in a space like this, you don't have to rely on your friends of color to try out ideas with, or to, share impressions with. Like, there's some questions on here that have been raised that I'm going to answer. And I think it's awesome that the person had a question about disagreeing with Black folks at her job. I think it's awesome you brought it here as a way of doing your own work before talking with them. That's called being responsible. So when you do something that focuses on your hidden biases with us, it gives you a way to see your blind spots before they cause some kind of harm, or before it becomes something that you then have to try to undo, which is why it saves you time and heartache. Mistakes are going to happen. You're growing, I'm growing, we're all learning. None of us is perfect ever. But when you put yourself inside of trainings and intensives, you give yourself like tools. You give yourself intellectual, but also emotional capacity, that if you don't put yourself in training spaces, then all you have is what you have in the moment of crisis. And really, just like I know there are parents and their moms on this call, because you commented in the chat, you don't want to wait until there's a crisis before you develop a skill. You want to develop that capacity so you can respond in the crisis to what is needed. So that's what we're promising. So it's happening on June 1st through 3rd, and it's in the afternoon, 12:30 to 3 p.m. Eastern time. It's happening on Zoom, so it's online. And it's a great opportunity for you to follow up. So I want to tell you about Deb, just to give you an example of a European American woman who's done some work with us inside of a group. And she said the big thing for her was that she felt supported to confront her fears and to step into a new place. And she felt supported to see herself with compassion. So that's what we do. That's our approach. Not everybody approaches racial justice that way. But for me, racial justice is all about liberation and inviting us to create a whole new world that feels good for all of us. And to me, that doesn't mean just intellectually agreeing with something. It's like a way of being that invites something beautiful to come into play. All right, so who is it for? So this is for you if you're ready to stop being afraid. You want to own your experience and stand on the ground of your own knowledge and your experience with authority. If you want to build relationships across the color line, this is especially important. If you want to be mentored, part of how we're doing this is we're having small group conversations, so you can get a sense of what does it feel like to be mentored, to put justice and compassion in the same lane. And finally, this is for you if you recognize you have to invest money and time if you want to grow. So today only, we do have 2 bonuses in addition to the training. If you sign up today, and this is today only, we're also going to give you a complimentary one-on-one racial justice strategy session. So this is an opportunity for you to speak with one of our mentors for 30 minutes about wherever it is that you are stuck or wherever it is you're trying to get to. So this in and of itself is a $497 value, and it's a free complimentary bonus when you sign up to do the training with us. And the kinds of issues people bring to a one-on-one session are similar to what I said before. If you're feeling like you don't know what to do next, if you're feeling, if you've had a particular conflict or crisis that you would value some outside perspective on, if you have a question that we can't really go into detail on in this chat or when we do the Q&A, this is a place where you could bring it. And then the second really valuable bonus, especially for this group, is our training on white women's tears. So some of you are probably familiar with white fragility, and you know how white women's tears can be used to derail racial justice, how they have been used, in fact, as weapons against Black people. And in this training, we talk about ways that you can build emotional resilience before you step into multiracial spaces, like how you can take care of yourself so that what you bring is your strength and your whole heart. So it's not, I don't think the answer is for you to not cry or to not have feelings and to become only like, an intellect. Because again, for me, the goal is liberation. So it's about wholeness. But there is a way in which you need to cultivate wholeness so that you can bring it to spaces when you bring your whole heart. And this training is something that we've gotten a lot of positive feedback about, and that is led by Lisa Graustein and myself. And so that's a $497 value. So you get all of this. You get the 3-day training with us on hidden racial biases, plus the racial justice strategy session, plus the white women tears training. And so all of that is for $497. I do want to say we only have 7 slots for those one-on-one conversations. So if that's something that you think you want, then go ahead and click on the link, which I've just shared with you, because we only have 7 slots for that one-on-one training. Okay, so that's the opportunity if you want to go deeper with us, if you want a next step to take, if we've opened up some stuff for you. So how do you sign up? You click on the link, you sign up, and you'll immediately get your login for the workshop, and you'll get taken to the calendar so you can sign up for the one-on-one slot. Again, we have 7 of those. So go ahead and sign up if you want it. Okay.